Welcome to the From Concealment Podcast, the show for firearm enthusiasts who like to shoot, train, carry, and compete. Get ready for some shooting insight, firearm and accessory reviews, and of course, insight on concealed carry. And now, broadcasting from behind enemy lines in the From Concealment studio, it's Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams.
Hey, Freedom Nation, this is Pete Mitchell.
And I'm Dan Sams.
And you're listening to the From Concealment Podcast, which we are no longer on a delay. So we're recording this today. We're going to release it today.
That's right.
And there's a lot going down, man. There's a lot going down with coronavirus. I saw it over the weekend. Tyson put out a full-page ad in like 3 papers, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and I don't know, some other one. Basically saying, hey guys, there's going to be a meat shortage. We cannot keep our plants open. Like, they literally put out full-page ads telling everyone this. And everyone's telling me I'm crazy for stocking up on meat. Like, every time I go to the store, I'm like buying whatever they will let me buy.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't know where to start, man. There's so much. So related to all this, did you see where Rand Paul addressed the Senate floor? Did you hear about this?
No. What did he do?
So Rand Paul, of course, who I like to remind everybody, Rand Paul is a medical doctor. He's a surgeon, very successful surgeon. Additionally, he is a senator. On top of it, he had coronavirus and has recovered. He addressed the Senate floor, I think it was last week, and he was citing just the research right now. He says, guys, we have to open up the economy. His language was, as we keep on testing, we're realizing the coronavirus was here much earlier than we thought. More people have already had it. And he's like, to the tune of like 25 to 50 times the amount of people they thought had it. He says, so that brings the death rate way down. This is a medical doctor who is also a senator who has also had it and recovered, and he says that it's closer to 0.025% death rate. He says a lot of the original death rate models were based on the what was the cruise ship, and he says that was really a skewed number. He says now that we're looking at what's really going on, the death rate is actually very, very low, and he's like, we got to open up the economy. He's not the only one. There was I shared an article. I don't know if you saw the article. I'm pretty sure it got shadow banned. Article of there's a medical professor from Stanford who is making the comment that the death rate's not that bad. He's not that this isn't serious, but we have to open up the economy. And he's getting treated like crap. This is a dude. He was in the top 100 scholars cited in the whole world, and he's saying, guys, it's not what you think it is.
It's moved from being, hey, we need to protect everyone, we need to do this, to, oh, crap, we need to justify everything we did and how many lives have been lost now because of this. Not because of the virus, but because of, I don't know if you saw the doctors from Kern County. They're at a Bakersfield hospital. They did an hour-long interview with ABC. And basically, they're like, look, let's look at the science here. And they're using the actual numbers reported to the CDC. And they're basically going, look, it's not as bad. It's basically the flu. That's basically what we're dealing with here. And of course, the ABC reporter is like, well, do you think the government has more information than you? And he's like, I'm using the information they're giving us. Yeah. So are they withholding information? Like, he didn't say that, but that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, are they withholding information? If they are, why? Why would you withhold information from the scientific community? You think you're the only one that can interpret it? I mean, it is not as bad, but it's moved from being, this is what we have to do, to, we better cover ourselves, politically speaking.
Yeah, that's pretty much where they're at, man. Oh, man.
It's scary.
Yeah. Well, and so the freedom movement is ticking along, though. Here in Ohio, there's a petition going around. It's sponsored by several Ohio House of Representative people, and they're essentially saying we want to reopen the entire economy May 1st, if not before, and they're pushing hard for it. And that's getting passed around, and that's got people behind it, man. It's not just some citizens; it's some actual Congressman, not a congressman, whatever, House of Reps, whatever. Yeah, it's a crazy time.
Yeah, you guys are better off than we are here in California. I mean, we're so screwed here in California because the people are sheep by and large. Like, I was in the Facebook group for my community, and this idiot chick in there is like, "Oh, look at our numbers are down. You keep it up, guys. Stay home. Keep it up." And like, she has one of those things around her picture, right? And it says "Vote Dem," and I'm like, "You're an idiot, lady. Like, you're an absolute idiot. Like, I don't vote Republican, but I never would vote Dem. Are you kidding me?"
That's right.
Oh my gosh.
It's crazy, man. Yeah. Well, at this point, you I think nailed it. Is that now the whole movement is them trying to justify the huge mistake they just made, and so now it doesn't matter. I mean,
the doctor in Bakersfield, I thought he handled it really well. He's like, look, based on the information that they had 2 months ago, they did the right choice. But now that we're 2 months later and we have all this data, we know this is the wrong choice. We need to change it. Mm-hmm. And they're going into, hey, here's the problem of, first of all, we're disinfecting everything. Like, it was him and another doctor whose specialty was like viruses and bacteria. And they're like, we're killing all the bacteria. Our body needs bacteria. Not all bacteria is bad. Plus, that's how we develop our immunity system. He goes, with everyone staying home and disinfecting everything, what do you think is going to happen when they open up? And we all start talking to each other and touching each other and being around each other. Like, it's going to run rapid.
Yeah. Well, and we're still in the fallout where people are blaming stuff on coronavirus that we can't even say. So my guess is when that happens, they're going to blame that on coronavirus. They're going to use that as some kind of, we should have stayed, right?
Well, we need to lock back up again. That's what's going to happen in California. I guarantee California is going for at least a twofer. Because we're idiots out here. We just fucking vote these idiots in over and over again.
Yeah.
And there's nothing we can do.
Oh, it's nuts, man. There's so I'm keeping an eye out. I'm hearing shit. You know how I got my finger on the pulse of the tinfoil hat movement. So I can't substantiate some of the things that are coming to me, but what's interesting to me is I've got the really, well, we'll call them, I don't know if we even call them right wing. I'll get the way out there conspiracy theorists who are saying things like people are not getting proper treatment in hospitals because they're trying to increase death rates. I'm hearing all these kind of crazy things that I'm like, okay, we can't substantiate that. May or may not be. That sounds kind of crazy. But it hit me the other day that the things from the so-called non-conspiracy theorists that are coming out, where they're like, well, this guy got sick, got better, was totally fine, and then this thing happened to him, and it was coronavirus. And I'm like, well, dude, like, you sound just like the crazy conspiracy theorists. And it's hitting me this week that the guys defending the lockdown now are starting to sound as crazy as my really crazy conspiracy theorist friends. And I'm like, no, neither of these things are you substantiating with facts. And so, yeah, we're in a crazy time, man.
Yeah, on a lot of different levels we are. I mean, one of the things that doctor said from Bakersfield is he's like, look, because our clinics that he's associated with go up and down the state, he's like, here's what we're seeing. We're seeing sexual abuse of minors skyrocket.
Yeah.
Which actually makes sense. I mean, you got some drunk parent at home who's already a pedophile, and it's like,
bad things
are going to happen. Suicides, which we've already talked about, are skyrocketing. Domestic abuse is skyrocketing. All these issues are skyrocketing, but people have turned into what we're trying to do is like lower the curve, or whatever the term was that they were like, we're trying to bend
flatten the curve.
Flatten the curve. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. Flatten the curve. It's gone from that to, no, we need to stop coronavirus. You can't stop a virus. It's not going to be stopped by staying home. It was only meant to flatten the curve. We're all still going to get it. So get over it, get ready for it, and deal with it when it comes. Yeah.
And half of us have already had it. I'm still talking to medical professionals that are like, I'm pretty sure I had it back in December.
I know, right?
Like they're like, I've already had it. You probably already had it. You're probably already better. Just go outside. What a wild time. Yeah. Yeah. So all this then we know is affecting gun sales. It's affecting gun laws because they're doing everything they can to implement draconian policies. And so that's where, of course, it comes back to us. We're trying to watch out for what's happening. So while we're at it, I wanted to make just notification, just so we're grounding this in some things. We were mentioning the Stanford scientist. His name was John Loanides. I'm not sure I'm saying his name right. Loannidis. Look him up. The Wall Street Journal had an opinion piece on how he's being treated because he is coming against the prevailing, notion about the lockdown. And he's saying that, hey, the science doesn't back up what we're doing, guys. And yet it's the media that's coming against him. So worth looking into that. Also, want to just point out, we might not want to take time to talk about this today, but if you want to look up Task Force Megaphone, if you're familiar with the Duncan Lemp situation in Maryland, the guy who was friends with him, who was kind of supporting and helping run some of the Duncan Lemp protests, got arrested on the way to a Duncan Lemp protest this past Sunday. They threw flashbangs at his car, big mess, real shady. So fellow Freedom Man is in jail, and it looks like pretty much because he is calling out the police department for murdering his friend. That same police department has threatened to arrest Duncan Lemp's parents for protesting. They've locked down the warrant. So the warrant that they were supposedly applying when they were going to arrest and ended up murdering Duncan Lemp, they won't let anybody see it. Everything's shrouded in secrecy, and it's a mess. And so if you get the chance, look up the Duncan Lemp situation, look up Task Force Megaphone, which is his call sign, the dude who was supporting that protest. So just letting everybody know, lots of stuff while the lockdown is happening. Other shady anti-gun things are going on. Hold on, we lost you, Pete. Are you muted?
Mike, let me.
Oh, there you go. You're back.
Sorry. So anyway, here's some news from California.
Yeah.
So California, as everyone knows, is pretty much out of its frickin' mind. And they don't hate guns. They hate everyday citizens having guns, right? They're totally fine with guns. They all have guns. They have none of the rules that the citizens have. They have standard capacity magazines, whether that's their Glock 17 with 17 rounds in it. None of us can buy a 17-round magazine legally anymore. So part of what they did was we had Proposition 63 a few years back, which basically they implemented it in phases because it was a big anti-gun move. And they made it so we can't buy ammunition on the internet anymore and have it shipped directly to us. It's got to be shipped to an FFL, who then has to do a background check for us, who can then release it to us. And of course, they're going to charge a fee, which basically means you can't get cheap ammo anymore, right? Which, by the way, is a violation of Interstate Commerce Clause, but, apparently, who gives a rip? Then what they did was, and this was finally enacted because they finally got their program up and running July 1st of last year, where you have to have a background check to buy ammunition in California. So, that's just not just having it shipped to you, but like now you go into the store, you want 50 rounds background check. And basically their justification is, well, there are prohibited people who are buying ammunition. They're prohibited from having a firearm. I didn't remember reading anything in the Second Amendment that says people are prohibited from having a firearm.
Exactly right.
Apparently, according to the courts, those constitutionally protected rights they don't really mean what you think they mean. They mean what we decided they mean. Mm-hmm. And but anyway, that's beside the point. So, the CRPA, the California Rifle and Pistol Association, which has been around since the 1800s, it's our longest standing pro-gun group. I'm a part of them. I believe in them as opposed to the NRA, which I believe is just taking money and not really doing anything for it.
Yep.
And anyway, NRA has been fighting this. I'm sorry, CRPA has been fighting this. And it just so happens that it lands on the desk of the judge that gave us what we affectionately in California refer to as Freedom Week, where last year we had 1 week where we could buy standard capacity magazines, and we sucked up the nation's supply of AR-15 magazines and just sucked everything into California.
I love how all of us were like saluting and saying, I can't buy them this week, but I understand. Go with God, the standard magazines.
Right. So it just so happens that this lands in his court. And so, about a month after the ammo checks went into play, they asked for an injunction. The CRPA asked for an injunction to stop this from going on. And I'm like, dude, what is taking this judge so long? He doesn't rule on that injunction until last Thursday.
Oh.
In which, in a 120-page work of art, he basically spells out, here's all the problems with what you're doing. Besides the interstate commerce, one of the things is you have to prove that you're a U.S. citizen in order to buy ammo. The problem with that is, in California, we will issue driver's licenses to anybody. We don't care if you're a citizen. We will give you a driver's license. You can be here illegally. So they said, okay, well, you have to have the new driver's license that basically proves you're a U.S. citizen. It says no federal limits on, or it says federal limits if you have the old one that just proves, I don't even know what the heck it's supposed to prove. The other one is like, okay, I'm a real citizen because I got proof. And I remember my wife had to get that, and she had to get like all this documentation of marriage change or, change of name when she got married and all that stuff for her to finally get it. For me, it was a little bit easier because I already had a passport. But the problem is you got to have a passport or a birth certificate or something like that. And so the judge actually cites as part of the reason, he goes, look, we've got this guy, and he lists the guy's name. I don't remember what it is. He goes, he's a retired Navy veteran who cannot buy ammo because he was adopted at an early age. He does not know his real father's name, so he can't get a birth certificate.
Oh, my gosh.
And he can't get a passport because he can't get a birth certificate. So he is barred from actually buying ammunition. And he's a veteran.
Yeah.
Because he can't prove he's a U.S. citizen. He goes, he's just one-sided case. Yeah. And, they're just going through all these different, it's a 120-page work of art, what this judge did, and just basically obliterating everything. So, of course, California immediately goes back to the judge and says, hey, we need a stay. Can you please stay the injunction? Right. And that's what happened last time. So last year, he issues his injunction. Standard magazines are totally illegal. It's constitutional. Heller versus McDonald, let them have them. Yeah. They have to go to that judge and say, please stay it while we appeal. He takes a week to stay it. And the only reason why he stayed it is because then they went to the Ninth Circuit Court because he wouldn't stay it. And then he goes, okay, here you go. Right? Because the Ninth Circuit Court's going to stay the injunction. So this time he immediately just comes back and goes, no, we're not staying this. So then, of course, they immediately appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court, which, of course, immediately stays the injunction. And so now we're back to being banned from buying ammo, which it's kind of funny because I was asking one of my buddy who's really tuned in with all this, with all these lawyers because of his company and what they do. And so he's been telling me since the beginning, he goes, the ammo law is not going to stand. It's going to get repealed. And I'm like, okay. So what's taking him so long from doing this injunction? He goes, he's waiting for the Supreme Court case, the New York Pistol Association or whatever it's called out there in New York versus New York, right? This is the one that we've all been waiting on for months now to see how the Supreme Court's going to rule on this. And he goes, he's waiting for that so he can cite that in his reasoning. So when he came out early, I was like, oh, he's not waiting for that. And then this morning we hear the Supreme Court rules on that. So I think Judge Benito got a heads up that it was coming down, and it was coming down not a way that he liked. So hurry up and put in your injunction because you're not going to be able to cite that in your case.
Man.
And so that leads us to the whole New York law. So here's what happened, guys, if you're not familiar with this, which I don't imagine anyone who listens to this podcast is not familiar with this. New York and their draconian laws basically said you cannot transport a firearm outside the city. You can't take it to a second home. You have to take it directly from your home to the gun range. And I think there was only 6 or 7 gun ranges in New York, so it had to be one of those. Didn't matter if there was a closer range that was outside the city. You couldn't go to that because you can't transport it outside the city. You can't stop at the grocery store. You can't stop and get a cup of coffee. You can't stop at a friend's house and pick them up. You can't swing by a friend's house who might be outside the city, pick them up on the way to the range. All of that was illegal. So they argued, New York argued every step of the way in every court case. No, this is totally illegal. We totally have the right to do this. We're still giving them the right to bear arms. They can have them in their homes. They can, transport them to the range, but they can't have them anywhere else. Didn't matter if they have a second home even in the same state. Man. Now you would have to have another gun in that home, which seems to me it would make it less secure if you're leaving it there.
Yeah.
While you go, you
go somewhere else.
Where you go somewhere else, but whatever, right? So then it gets all the way to Supreme Court. So what does New York do? Oh, crap. We know how the Supreme Court's going to rule on this. Let's go ahead and just take the law away.
Yeah.
And so the whole debate with the Supreme Court was, is this a moot case or not? Because they've already changed the law by taking it away.
Right.
And of course, what they came back and ruled was, okay, it's a moot case because there is no law anymore. So we don't need to worry about it. It would have had far-reaching implications all the way here to California, where California, we have an assault weapons ban. Basically, you have to have basically permission, if you will, this paperwork that says you've got this assault weapon, and you have to have that paperwork with you everywhere you go if you have that assault weapon. So if you take it to a range, you better have that paperwork with you.
Man.
The range is going to check your firearm. They're not going to let you shoot it unless you've got the paperwork. And it would have basically just squashed all of that because it's so unconstitutional. It's not even funny. So I think that's the reason why the judge came out and ruled against, or did the injunction last week, is because he got a heads up that this was coming down the pipe for the Supreme Court. But
what a shady world we live in when they're pushing through laws that they know are unconstitutional. They know that the Supreme Court would reject, and yet they push them through, try to hold them until they know they're going to get blocked, and they reverse it. Yeah. It's just manipulation. And it's just wrong.
Well, and that's what 3 of the justices said. I believe it was Alito, Roberts, and Clarence Thomas. I believe it was those 3 who basically said, if we don't rule on this, they were 3 of the dissenting opinions. They said, if we don't rule on this, then we're being manipulated. We're allowing them to manipulate us. Because the whole they fought against it in every court case, but then when they knew it was going to us, they didn't want us to decide it.
Exactly. Because then you've got something that's binding and there's a precedence and there's a whole thing.
Yeah, they got something that's binding-ish because no one's following their precedents. And that was one of the things that Justice Kavanaugh, he wrote a separate dissent, and he said, procedurally, I agree with them. It is a moot case. However, we better hurry up and take one of these other 2A cases that are coming our ways because we have courts who are not following Heller versus McDonald.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm looking at this going, he's totally right. First of all, if you follow Heller versus McDonald, then there are no assault weapons because it's whatever is commonplace. AR-15s are commonplace. California with their what do we call it? Our roster. You can only buy certain handguns from a dealer here in California. That's illegal. Standard capacity magazines, those would be legal. None of this 10-round crap. Same thing with New Jersey with their limit on magazine capacity. All of that would be gone if people actually followed the precedent.
But they're not gonna, because
I have no faith. I have no faith in our elected officials. I have no faith in our Supreme Court.
No.
I don't trust any of these guys to do what's right at all.
Well, and sadly, I say this, understand the context. I don't have a lot of faith in the Constitution anymore. Not because it's not a good document, but it sure isn't working to protect our freedom right now. So I'm like, it's only as good as, the rule book is only as good as the people who are going to follow it. And
people have to follow it, and we have to make it be enforced.
Yeah.
And first of all, It's like California. These idiots who are like, no, it's totally okay that you strip away all of our freedoms, close our businesses. Like, think about this. In California, you have an essential business if you do lawn maintenance for a government building. But if you're a self-employed contractor, you better stay home and be out of business. Screw you and your family. We don't really care about you.
Man, that makes you want to do things to tyrants, man. Like,
it really does.
I gotta be careful what I say, but like that just makes you like that's tyranny. Like we can get people to come and cut our grass, but you can't feed your family. That's tyranny right there. And
the problem is too many people aren't in that situation, meaning they're okay. They have enough savings to make it through this.
Yeah.
You know, they're surviving. Their job maybe hasn't been cut, or how many. I freaking hate our teachers here in California, man. I'm sorry. I know you're supposed to like love teachers and all that crap.
They're overrated.
Like, dude, all of you are getting paid. You're all going to get paid. You do nothing for that money at all right now. And then they have the balls to email me telling me, oh, by the way, it's California law that you do X, Y, Z. And I'm like, oh, don't. In fact, I got so mad at my son's teacher. I go, don't you ever email me about California law. You all have lost the right to talk to me about law. Got it? I even said it just like that, right? And she's like, she emails me back, Mr. Mitchell, just know that we're forwarding that on from the district. And I'm like, you signed your name to it, lady. Don't blame someone else. You signed your name. And they said it again today. It's California law. And I'm like, screw you. I'll tell you what California law is, not this crap you're doing.
Oh, I love it. Oh. Yeah, that's good. When they threatened to forward it, I was like, oh, please do. I would love it if you forwarded it to anybody you can. Oh, man. So I'm with you, Pete.
Yeah. So I don't know, man. I think, unfortunately, I think the only way we're going to get out of this is to shoot our way out of this. And that's just not a road I want to go down. I'm not a violent person. I love shooting at paper targets. Yeah, man. That's what I want. I want to see paper get holes punched in it. I don't even like to hunt, man. That's just not my deal.
I'm the same way, man. I don't like to see things die. I don't really like hunting. I'm not against it. I'm not against it either. I don't like to do it. I don't hunt. It breaks my heart, man. I've been there for the processing of a deer, and I'm like, man, this breaks my heart. Like I'm totally for this, and I just don't like being there for it.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, with this potential meat crisis coming up, I wish I could hunt. Oh, I wish I even knew how to hunt. I don't even know how to hunt.
I've been keeping careful tabs on where there's a gang of turkey in the field behind our house. I've been watching the gang of turkey. I've been watching for the deer. Actually, our guest today has tried to hunt out here, and he's convinced that the deer are invisible because he's like, they're fresh footprints right where I was looking. But yeah, man, I'm with you. We're all going to have to.
Why don't you introduce our guest?
Yeah, so because I'd love to bring him on here. So I want to introduce Tyler. Tyler's a good friend, part of the Freedom Nation. I don't know if we should use last names or not. Tyler, you jump on. Are you with us here? Can you hear us?
He's like,
can you hear me?
No, don't use my last name.
We can hear you. Yeah, we won't use your last name.
Yeah, do not use my last name.
So a couple of things going on here, man. Yeah, we definitely we can't use your last name. Now that I think about it, there's all the reasons not to. Tell us a little bit. I know you've been doing some research. You've got background in military and tactics, survival and stuff like that. But first, I know you've been doing a lot of research related to the coronavirus stuff. And I know you came across something related to hospitals and how they're getting funding from certain things. Can you just give us a little drop on that real quick? And then I want to ask you about a couple of other real practical survival things because those things are going to be really practical probably in another month or two.
Yeah, for sure. So you guys were talking about the coronavirus, and I actually had to fact check it just to make sure that it was, not just a meme on Facebook, but we all know that's how news is spread now.
Yeah. That's definitely how I get all my news, by the way. Yeah. Memes on Facebook.
You have to fact check it though. So I guess
only if I disagree with it do I have to fact check.
That's right.
Well, I just forwarded some quote on to Dan yesterday, and he was like, "Hey, man, this isn't what that guy said at all." I was like, "Well, that's embarrassing."
But we can do that in the private messaging.
Yeah.
Which actually, I don't want to interrupt you, but just there's some of the Snopes reporting on stuff has been funny because some of the stuff that's coming out that's accurate, they're fact checking as much as they fact check, and they can't deny that it's true. And so they're trying to put every other bit of information, like the video from the hot mic in the press conference room at the White House. If you guys saw that, that turned out to be accurate.
Was that real?
It was real. So Snopes even acknowledged. Now, of course, if you look at it, it says something like, well, it's complicated. Ended up being real. What they said, what the guys have said, the two guys, whoever was in the room, was that they were just joking. But it absolutely caught a hot mic, caught them saying that. They really did say it.
See, my buddy
really
who works
recorded
in audio, he goes, there's no way it's real. He goes, neither one of them are wearing lapel mics. And he goes, and one guy's got a mask on, and listen to how clear it is. He goes, there's no way that's real.
So you should read the Snopes comment.
I will now because I'm going to send it to him. I deleted it from my Facebook because I was like, you're right. It's probably fake.
Here's what my thought was, because we know there's not a vaccine, at least not.
Well, they're testing the vaccine.
There's not one.
They're testing one.
So, but supposedly this guy was saying, "Oh, we all have the vaccine." Blah 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 blah. So now this is Snopes. So I don't trust Snopes. I'll just begin by saying I never trust them. They're not worthwhile they have no credentials for fact checking. I don't respect them at all. But I considered it enemy attestation. They don't want this to be true, and yet they're like, "Yep, these guys really said this, but they were joking." And so I believed that because they certainly don't want to, acknowledge that it's real. So all that said, maybe we can't trust them even on anything. So side note, that was just reading.
Sorry, Tyler, that was a rabbit hole we went down.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Tyler. No, that's we do that a lot, man. So go ahead, though.
So,
what did you find out about the hospitals?
So, I did fact check, and it does say that legislation pays hospitals higher Medicare rates for COVID-19 patients in treatment, but there is no evidence of fraudulent reporting. It doesn't have to be fraudulent because they just said that no matter what you die of, we're labeling as COVID-19 as long as you had it at some point.
And they can't detect fraud that quickly. Like fraud takes a while to get a case going, and then you got to take them to court. Yeah. So that's just stupid.
The whole reporting process is fraudulent in and of itself. If I get hit by a car but I had corona, they're saying that I died because of corona.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and you guys have all seen the meme of be nice to your spouse because she could totally murder you and you would just be listed as a COVID-19 case.
Right.
Yeah. There was a great one I sent to Peyton, our mutual friend. And it was a husband talking with his wife, and his wife goes, "Did I really get that fat in quarantine?" And he goes, "Well, you were never really that skinny." And then it says, husband died, April 27th, 11:28 p.m. Due to coronavirus.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great.
And it says that the guy who said that he did not think hospitals were intentionally misclassifying cases. Well, why would they ever report that they were intentionally misclassifying anything?
Yeah. Well, and a side note, what we were getting from that, even if everybody has the best intentions, right? They have a motivation now for things to go a certain way with COVID-19 cases because they're going to make more money off of those. We also know that other people are not going to the hospital for things they probably should because of fear over coronavirus. And so we know that some of these hospitals are actually struggling on something, which is still
they're furloughing employees, doctors and
hospitals.
And so, they have a very real interest in saying there's probably COVID-19. And so we can't trust the numbers at all. So this kind of leads me to my next question, because we've for the last, I don't know how long we've been talking about this stuff, Pete. We've been addressing that, even before COVID-19, we're stuff is going down. We're losing our freedoms, and the economic fallout, even from other stuff happening, put aside COVID-19, just inflation, all this other stuff. We're looking at hey, survivalism is an important piece of what we're doing. So I know, Tyler, you and I have looked into some of this. You've got military background on some of this. Got any recommendations related to survival, related to tactics, anything like that if we face a grid down scenario, things we should know?
Yeah. Well, first starting off, I would say that me and you, we tested our survival skills. What was it? Maybe 2 years ago now, where we took our bug out bags and we hiked what was supposed to be a short hike out into the woods.
It was a terrible hike.
Yeah.
I almost died of hiking.
what we learned was that nothing ever goes according to plan. So if you think that your bug out location is 6 miles away, it ended up being 12 miles for us. And we were close to death, I would say.
Yeah. It was hilly hiking. Yeah.
So yeah, just getting out there, putting a pack on and hiking out there would be beneficial to anybody so that they're ready for when it happens. Because I mean, speaking of, you guys were talking about hunting. I mean, this past fall, I set up on a piece of land near Dan, and I didn't realize how out of shape I was until I had to climb up a tree just to hunt deer. And I got up there and I was like, man, I should probably be working out a little bit more, because if I got to do this to survive, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
So no, go ahead.
No, well, so you're bringing up a couple of things there. One is just the nature of your gear and some preparation in real life experiences. I know we ran into things like the handgun I had planned to have as my bug out weapon. We're in really humid conditions, and it was rusting, and within 24 hours. Yeah. And so I'm picking, and I'm like, man, I've got to use something different here. Like, this can't be my gun for my long-term bug out. I've got to have something that has, more composite or whatever. Notice that the other thing that I know those of us, especially family men, we need to consider, bugging out is very seldom going to be exactly what we want to do, except as a last resort. So bugging in and preparation for that, like, that was one of the things I learned, is I'm like, I don't want to freaking walk anywhere. And so if I have to, like Pete in the situation he's in, Pete, you might have to bug out because you're in an urban metropolis.
We wouldn't bug out. Here we'd have to bug in because it's 100 miles to get to a non-populated area. I mean, that's crazy.
That's true.
So then you start assessing bugging out in your vehicle. You know, you have a car bag. I keep a car bag, carry it with me where I go. But that's a whole nother issue, because then you're trying to get out of town in a vehicle.
Right.
Yeah. Which helps a little bit.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So, but speaking on the whole light packing survival thing, I think I just sent this to Dan the other day. It's a DIY survival 410 shotgun kit. And you can look it up. It's from Runway Sub Cal, and it's basically a shotgun made out of pipes. And
nice.
You can break it down.
Oh, yeah.
It comes with all the stuff you need. And then you just buy a few pipe fittings from the hardware store. But the good thing about it is you break it down, throw it in a PVC pipe. Now you have a waterproof survival weapon. I'm not saying that you should be hiding it in your backyard, but if you needed to.
You could.
You all need to send that link over to us here in California. I think we might need to see that.
No FFL required. I'll have Dan send it over to you.
Pete,
there's no FFL required until here in California you assemble it, and then you better get that thing registered.
Well, what I thought was interesting too was the piece they send you has a Weaver mount integrated into it, so now you have a laser survival shotgun.
I'm looking at this right now.
Shotgun made of PVC pipes.
You know what though? That's the one I'm looking at is like plumbing piping.
Yeah, it's steel.
Yeah, it's steel. So yeah, but yeah, I love that there's a Weaver mount. Heck yeah, man.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, this one's $125, so you're looking at under $200. You're getting a decent weapon to pack up as a last resort, even small game hunting.
Yeah. Well, and it's 410. The kick on the 410 is not going to be terrible.
Well, I would hope so, because that thing probably weighs 1.5 pounds.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, that's probably why they built it for 410.
I could actually keep that in my car and no one would know what it was.
Exactly.
Like, because just by looking at it, you'd be like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
It looks like a marshmallow shooter.
Looking at what that is. It's just it looks like a marshmallow shooter. So something else that I know you and I have talked about has been communications. Now, I know where we're at in the region where we're in the Midwest. We actually, in the early days of the coronavirus lockdown, I know our town actually had a cell phone outage where for a short time, cell phones didn't work at all. I know internet we've had issues with, probably mostly just because everybody's on it at the same time. But a couple of things have come up related to communications that you and I have talked about. One is using something like the Bridgeify app, because it runs from a grid network over the phone using Bluetooth. So even if everything's down, including your internet, There's an opportunity for communication. So recommending everybody get that Bridgify app. And then we've talked about ham radio. And I will tell you, I actually would have thought even a year or two ago that getting into ham radio was just beyond anything I was going to be able to do. And you talked a little bit about a way in which, for relatively inexpensive, the average person can get into it and then have something for a grid down scenario. So tell us a little bit about that. What should the average Freedom Nation member know about ham radio?
Yeah, so I know that you brought it up before on here about the Baofeng. We use a UV5R, it's called, and it just looks like a normal walkie-talkie, but it can be programmed from the computer. So you go online and you look up your local repeaters for fire, police, all of that. You can look up local ham repeaters, and you can legally listen in on ham radio, and in an emergency situation, you are legally allowed to transmit on ham radio. So I know that a guy that I personally know spoke to somebody who is 7 miles away with the UV5R, just testing
Leroy
out
too.
the ham repeater. Yeah, I spoke to Leroy over the radio, and we were able to speak to each other from extremely far away. Normal walkie-talkies wouldn't reach. And I know that my family, my distant family, uses walkie-talkies for bug out, and the Baofeng UV5Rs and even going up the models can speak to regular walkie-talkies. So you got a group of local Freedom Nation lovers that they haven't invested as much, and you can speak to them relatively inexpensive. I would say we paid $50 and we got upgraded antennas and everything. So it really works. And being able to program it from the computer, I took my computer over a friend's house and programmed his in 15 minutes, I would say.
Yeah, probably not even
just
that
from
much.
An Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah. So worth getting, you download the various channels, you put everything on there. It's a really good way in a grid down scenario, especially if you've worked with your, people you're going to communicate ahead of time. You guys know what channels you're going to be on. Really handy tool. And I know in my case, my plan is to bug in a scenario, which, I mean, it's effectively what we're doing right now. We still have, easily access, communications, internet and whatever. But my Baofeng is ready to go. And so, yeah.
And I would say just even outside of like the ham radio thing, like you brought up the Bridgify, just having a communications plan with your friends, your squad, your family. I mean, we talked about how we're family men. Have a communications plan with them, because when the grid goes down or whatever happens, you're going to need to be able to speak to them. And if it's me talking to Leroy with a Baofeng, or me talking to Dan with the Bridgify app, or being able to transmit all the way out to California using different repeaters, it's good to have and to know what stations to listen to or what apps to tune into to talk to each other.
So one more question for you then, man. So I know that you're a veteran, you're connected with a whole lot of different veteran groups. And when I'm talking to people in law enforcement and military, I'm noticing two different types of responses when we start talking about freedom. One, I would say when I'm talking to law enforcement, I get at best maybe a 50-50 response when I'm talking to them about enforcing gun laws. And there are still a few guys out there that are saying, well, we just won't enforce the gun laws. And I'm seeing some county sheriffs step up, seeing some good things, some deputies, whatever. For whatever reason, I've noticed it's county sheriffs tend to be more supportive of the Second Amendment than city cops. I'm wondering if that has to do with the fact that a lot of county sheriffs have to get voted in. Not certain how all that works, but I'm noticing that. But speaking from a veteran's perspective, when we start talking about draconian gun laws, when we start talking about extreme situations in which you've got National Guardsmen, maybe even active duty, that might be deployed to quell unrest, where would you say most of our veterans and active duty military are going to land when it comes to freedom and the Boogaloo?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I've noticed a split. I definitely have spoken to active duty and then Federal Reserves who have said, like, man, that's the National Guard. We're not touching that. We're going to be defending our houses the same way you are. Now, when you get into deploying active duty stateside, which is just, that's a whole nother level. So I would say that if we got to that point, the people who I've spoke to who tend to be more on the freedom side, who said like, man, I'm not going to people's houses. I'm not enforcing, draconian gun laws. That's the National Guard. I would say that if it got to the point where active duty was being deployed, they're willing to go AWOL is the thing that I've got. If you're getting to that point, then they're not going to worry about you running away. They're going to want the people who are going to do what they want.
Yeah.
So, but amongst the crowds that I've ran with, the people are mainly saying, man, that's the National Guard. I'm not getting in the middle of that because I usually speak to active duty and reserves who are both federally operated. So
yeah,
that happened on a federal level. You're talking about the actual boogaloo.
Yeah, the actual
boogaloo.
Pete, did you have any comments or questions in all of this, man?
Any chance we can get that boogaloo to kick off here in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
The shot heard around the world, man.
Yeah.
With a
That's what I'm
410 pipe
saying.
shotgun.
I don't know when it's the 410. I don't know when it's going to happen, man, but it's getting dicey out there. I mean, I'm looking at, again, this is California. This is freaking crazy out here, but the cops don't seem to care. Like they're going to enforce these absurd laws. Like, I think, Dan, I forwarded an article to you by I don't know if he's active duty police officer. I think he is. He used to be with the LA PD, and now he's some other city. And he didn't mention what city. And he's like, look, what they're doing in enforcing these edicts, right? Because they're not laws.
Yeah.
They're edicts. What they're doing by enforcing them is eroding the public trust of police officers dramatically. And his point was, he goes, look, you got a guy who's paddleboarding on the ocean with no one around him.
Man.
And he goes, and I just drove to downtown LA through all of the homeless encampments where there is no social distancing, nothing. And the police don't go there.
Mm-hmm.
So what are they trying to enforce? Because they're not stopping that group of people, but they're stopping the guy who's by himself on the ocean.
Yeah.
And arresting him.
Yeah.
I think if that proves anything, it's that it's not about a virus. I mean, that's just plain cut and dry. It's about way more than a virus.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I would say it's an exasperation of an issue that's been there before. I've always maintained that, the cops will go for low-hanging fruit. They'll catch the guy selling weed on the corner. They'll harass, the person who's going, 8 miles over the speed limit. They'll go to court to push for somebody to have a fine go through or whatever. But they have stacks and stacks of untested rape kits all the time. There's regular abuse situations not getting dealt with. The things that we actually want
That's
them
because they're not going to turn on their fellow cops.
Exactly right.
Oh, man.
That's exactly right. It's exactly right. So that's where I'm like, guys, like, I can hear the argument for needing cops for whatever, but I'm like, then freaking do what we need you to do. I was actually on another podcast. I was on a theology podcast last week, and we were talking about the whole Romans 13 thing and Christians obeying law and authority. And I like to point out, like, God describes the purpose of the authorities for really totally for protecting good and preventing evil. That's it. There's nothing about roads. There's nothing about speed limits. There's nothing about any of that crap. It's making sure that innocent people don't get abused by someone else. And it then goes on to say, this is why we pay taxes. Now, this is not talking about cops there. It's talking about magistrates and whatever. But if we're going to say that the government has a purpose, that's their purpose. We don't pay taxes to get roads. We don't pay taxes for welfare programs. We don't pay taxes for whatever else. We pay taxes to make sure that the innocent are defended. And so if they're not doing what they're supposed to do, they're totally outside of at least the biblical purview of what they're supposed to do. And so when they're arresting some guy for paddleboarding alone and they're not dealing with these other things, that's where I'm like, are you guys even what you're supposed to be? And I think you guys brought it up that, like, the public trust is eroding, and for good reason. The problem was it was already eroding. We're just seeing it on a much bigger scale.
Yeah,
right
we
now.
had, I don't think it was last week. It could have been the week before. I don't know. Every day now is pretty much blending together at this point.
Yeah.
So we had the CHP.
Which, by the way, is a tactic. I don't want to jump in too much. I'm sorry, man. But that's a tactic in in psychological warfare.
That's interesting.
That is a tactic.
Health.
Yeah, which there's a whole other, like, reading some of the PSYOP stuff and everything.
Dude, I've been reading your book on killing.
Yes,
Oh,
it's
on
a
killing.
great
That's
book.
a good one.
Dude,
Holy cow, it's heavy, but it's good.
it is
Yeah.
heavy. I'm like, wow, man, that is just.
Oh, dudes, I'm so sorry, Pete. I want to hear what you have to. But this is, oh my gosh. My wife's reading a book called "The Body Keeps the Score," and it's about trauma. And it's very interesting how the military the government was seeing all of the PTSD stuff coming back, and it was one of the few things that they were pulling back funding from. All this other research, and I'm like, you guys will fund MK Ultra where you use trauma to hurt somebody, but you won't study it in order to try to help veterans. Anyway, sorry, Pete.
Yeah,
We need to hear what you have to say.
No,
Sorry,
I just
got
was
too
throwing that out
excited.
there because that's a phenomenal. I'm barely into it, right? I'm like listening to it while I'm out on my bike rides, and I'm like, wow, dude, crazy. No, but anyway, what I was going to say is, so we've here in California, we got something called the CHP. We don't have state troopers. We have California Highway Patrol, CHIPS, if you guys remember the show from back in the day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's who we got, right? And so they
Eric
were
Estrada.
out. You got it. They were out, and they were proud, issuing press releases. They wrote 150 tickets in like 4 hours on a Southern California freeway because they wanted to, remind everyone, just because coronavirus is going on, you still need to slow down when you drive.
Oh
it's
my gosh.
Are you freaking kidding me? They're like,
Have you ever been on an open stretch of highway?
Yeah. They're like, we understand there's less crashes, less accidents, but you need to slow down.
Oh
Why?
my gosh.
There's no one else on the road.
So to hear.
Why? Why do I need to slow down?
What am I going to run into? Air? Right.
I remember we have this town just a little out near Cleveland by us, and I was at a stoplight, and there was I could see the camera on the stoplight, and it's just a small village, and my grandma was in the car with me, and she said, be careful when you take off because the speed limit's 25 and they'll send you a ticket. So I'm at a stoplight. I go through the intersection, and 2 weeks later, I have a letter from the village, and it says that I was doing 35 through the intersection. And I said, well, that's impossible because I was stopped. So I didn't accelerate 0 to 35 in, 200 feet. I'm driving a crappy red truck. So I'm looking at this ticket, and it says, we're not charging you with anything, and there's nothing you can come in and fight. You just need to pay this $100 administrative fee to maintain the village. And I said, so you're admitting that I didn't do anything wrong and that I can't fight it, but yet I'm supposed to send you money. That is where the downfall started happening. And then I have a buddy in West Virginia. He lives right at the Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania border. And he said they're doing the same thing. He said you'll get a bill from a company in New York that you have to send the money to them to maintain that speeding trap.
So can I just send invoices? Pete, we both run businesses. Can we just send invoices where we're like, hey, send you this invoice. You can't do anything about it, but people suck.
People do that, and it's actually illegal. Because people do that.
Government does it.
That's how a bunch of scammers make money. They send invoices to big companies because they're so big. They don't know what the heck they've ordered, and they just start paying invoices.
That's hilarious. I mean, that's wrong. But like, if the government can do it, can we do it to the government? We'll call it like reverse taxes. I'm totally joking. Don't anybody do this. Please don't report me.
Dude,
well, and the problem is it's not the police sending it. So it's the village. So it's not like who are you going to fight it with?
Well, then what's their recourse if you don't pay it?
That was my thought, but it was in my wife's name because the truck was in her name. So she was like, please just send them this money so they won't bother me.
Yeah. That happens to me a lot.
She could claim, well, if you have this on camera, you can clearly see I'm not driving the truck.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And based on the 4th and 5th Amendments, I don't have to divulge anything to you. And based on spousal privilege, I don't have to.
Yeah.
Which they go, well, that's technically telling us it's your spouse. Well, no, I didn't say that. That's not at all what I said.
I did not say that.
I don't have to say anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just so crooked, man. It's just like even those laws where it's forfeiture of like cash and stuff, and they're saying, well, you got to prove where you got the cash from, right? And it's because they haven't wanted to go to the Supreme Court, and it always happens to minorities, like in really shady areas of the country. And I'm like, dude, this is so jacked up. Like,
yeah, man.
I'm white. I don't run into that, but I'm thinking about our buddy Peyton. His daughters are both black. Mm-hmm. I'm like, dude, they go through certain parts of Texas and this crap starts happening to them.
Mm-hmm.
That's crap, man.
Yeah, man.
That's total crap.
It is, dude. Yep. Oh, yeah. So anyway, the 10th Amendment or the 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights is kind of like just lost at this point. Dudes, this is fun though. I appreciate the time. Tyler, thanks for joining us today.
I appreciate you having me here, man.
Yeah, man. Always fun to talk freedom. And appreciate you guys. As always, feel free to check out Lake Erie Arms. We've got plenty of good stuff going on, especially if you are in Northeast Ohio. And if you're not from here and you're doing a build, you can obviously buy parts, get some good stuff. It'd be cool. Pete, next time you're out here, back when the Gestapo let you start driving again, you come out here. We'll get you.
I'm not driving to Ohio. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Hey, once you fly in, you're going to have.
I got a nice gun case so I can fly with my firearms.
Yeah,
so
we'll transport you, take you to the range, man.
There we go.
Shoot, we'll take you to the backyard.
But I want to shoot some real guns, not these California crappy guns.
Yeah. Those, what you got there is paddles for the canoe.
People are in shock when I tell them this in other states. You don't understand. We are on Gen 3 Glocks because we can't buy anything higher than that because it's not on our roster.
That's so sad.
Gen 3.
I will say, Pete, because of you, I went Glock and I'm not looking back.
Nice. What were you before that?
Well, I had a Walther and it was a 380. So I wanted a 9mm. I switched to Glock and I'm not looking back. It's a dream to shoot.
Yeah, and I like how you conveniently gloss over the fact that you were concealed carrying in 1911. I mean, I love you, but you were. And
full size 1911?
Yeah, full size 1911.
Well, see, the beauty about because I've concealed carried my full size 1911. The beauty of that is the single stack is so much thinner. Mm-hmm. So it actually, in a lot of ways, is not more difficult. I'd actually say it's easier than concealed carrying a Glock.
But try appendix carrying a 5-inch barrel. When you sit down, your life is threatened. The lives of millions of children.
Yes, that's true.
Oh, it's good stuff. You guys, this is fun. Looking forward to seeing you next week, Pete. And we got anything else do we need to let people know about?
That's it.
All right.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right, you guys take care.
Take care. Bye.
All right.
You've been listening to the From Concealment Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams. Be sure to tune in next week for more gun talk. Also, check out the From Concealment website for more shooting-related goodness at FromConcealment.com.